Hey guys, Jason Timothy here, musicsoftwaretraining.com, and I thought I would make a kind of beginner's video for Ableton users, for people who might have just bought the program, have no idea how to use it, and are a little bit confused with this window and how everything kind of works. I wanted to make this as easy as possible for you so that you can navigate through Ableton and get yourself started. All right. So first and foremost, I'm not gonna go into any of the advanced things. I just want to get you understanding all the basics. So to start with, let's go through on this window here. We've got our, just like any DAW, what I'm doing here is representing time from beginning to end, right? And these are all separate tracks. So you've got MIDI tracks and audio tracks, and those are the only two types of instruments you're going to have. Okay, so a MIDI track is going to be anything that Ableton has as far as its own tools. For example, if we come over here to our instruments, these are all the basic instruments that we've got. Drum instruments, synth instruments, sampler instruments, and that sort of thing are all here. So if we want to bring in, let's say, an operator synthesizer, we just simply drag it into a MIDI track. And now we have it here, okay? With audio is anything that you record in. So if I wanted to record my voice right now, I could just simply arm the track, hit record, and hello, 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 okay? And now we've got this, and hello, hello, hello. We've got that in on an audio track. Now, you can not only record, you could also drag in samples or whatever you want. So if you've got a sample library, or if you want to use Ableton's sample library, which is right here, you could simply drag in just audio files, right? Here's a crash. Got it? So that's how that works. And it also works with loops as well. If I come in here and I drag in a drum loop, I can just pop that in. All right. So the reason that you're able to hear what you're clicking on here is this little icon. So anytime you see a headphone icon, this will allow you to preview different sorts of sounds and stuff like that. So that's the basics of audio and MIDI tracks. All right. MIDI is any sort of synth instrument or anything inside the computer that you're going to be using to create sounds. Audio is anything that's coming either from a sample or recording from outside the computer, whether it be a live instrument like a guitar, a bass, a piano, or vocals. All of that will be audio. Okay, so now that we have that, let's get into what we're looking at here. Okay, so what we've got here, we've got our track number, we've got our name, so we could use, if we right click, we can go to rename and we can call this track whatever we want, so that if this was going to be a bass track or something, we could just call that bass, just like so. You don't really need to mess with a whole lot of this, but let me just kind of show you the basics. All ins just basically means that anywhere that MIDI signal is coming from, this will get it as long as your track is armed. Over here, when you arm a track, that means this track is ready to be recorded on. Okay, so if this is armed, and I come over here and then I hit record here, now there's going to be latency, so it's not going to sound very good, but I come up here to the keyboard. You can hear, let me just turn it up for people who don't have sub speakers. Right? So I could just come in here, hit record, and right, and that would record those MIDI notes on that instrument. Okay, so that's how that works there. So yeah, you could leave these the same. You could leave this on auto. If you're recording in, that means that you're actually going to be listening to what you're recording. You'll notice this works best for like audio. Like if you're recording your vocals or something like that on an audio track, if I come in here, you can actually hear me talking, right? So you don't necessarily want that while you're recording unless you've got headphones on or what have you. And then you would be able to hear yourself in your headphones. All right. This button here is basically just muting the track, which means turning the track off or turning the track on. All right. Soloing the track means that this is going to be the only track out of everything that is heard. So when you solo a track, it's just going to isolate that one track. And then this is how you arm a track. So if you want to record something onto a track, you would arm the track and then you would hit record up here. Okay. So that's the basics of, audio and MIDI tracks. Your MIDI tracks are going to be any instrument or third-party instrument that you have. So any of these instruments here are going to be dragged onto a MIDI track. All right. So now that we have audio and MIDI, let's get into what's going on up here at the top. Okay. So here you don't need to worry so much about, but this actually uses Bluetooth and it can link up like an app on your phone or an app on like an iPad or something like that, so that they'll sync up in tempo. Okay. Tap means that you could just kind of tap out the tempo. So if you got an idea in your head, boom, 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 it will find the tempo for you, right? Most of the time though, the way I would go about it is I turn on the metronome here and then just kind of listen. And then I can just click on the tempo here and make it faster or slower to what I've got in mind. And you could also come in here if you know that you want something at 100 BPM, you could just type in 100 and then you're good. These here, this is for DJs, so you could actually speed up or slow down your whole project or whatever file's being played with this here. Once again, it's more of like a DJ sort of effect, and we're not really getting into that now, but that's what that is. This is your time signature. If you're a beginner, you just want to leave this on 4/4. You don't need to mess with that. This over here is our quantized settings, and it's mainly used for our clips over on this end here. So let's just say we had a couple loops. Okay, so I'm just going to create another audio track here. And I'm going to drag in a couple loops here. So a loop here and a loop here. All right, so for playing one loop, it'll switch to another loop at this. So if you were doing something live, you'd probably want it set to 1 bar. That way, when you click something, it will not trigger until you go to the next bar. If I have it on none, it's going to be kind of hard to get it right. It actually seems kind of weird just because of the loop. Let me, there we go. So hear that little skip because I didn't hit it at the right time. You don't want that when you're doing something live. So you can make it to like the closest bar and then it'll wait for this amount of time before it will go to the next clip. So that's what this is for. We're not really going to be working in this window here just because it can actually make things confusing for this window here. And everything that you do in a song needs to end up in this arrange window. Okay, I'll do another video on the session window at another time. But this over here is your count in. So you could either choose 1 bar, 2 bars, or 4 bars. So 1 bar is just 4 notes, a 1, 2, 3, 4 count. If you want an 8 count, then you would go 2 bars. And that just means when I'm recording, before it starts actually doing the recording, it gives me a 4 count. Right? And we can get rid of this. over here, this here determines where the cursor is going to be. If you have this, the cursor will always stay in the middle of the screen. So once we get to the middle of the screen, you'll notice that this will start moving instead of the cursor, right? Whereas if this is off, the cursor is always going to move and the screen's going to stay the same, all right? It'll even go off screen, right? And you would just need to catch up with it. So that's up to you. This just says where you're at in the song. So right now the cursor is at 32 bars, 2 beats. There's your play, stop, and record button. Your plus button means that you could record over something without erasing it. So for example, with our MIDI here, if I didn't have this on and I started recording, it would record over these parts. All right, so let's just, as you can see, it's erasing those notes, right? If this is on, I can add notes, but it won't erase what I've already got. So I could just add notes to whatever's happening. This works really well when you're building drums and stuff. So maybe you start with your kick drum and your snare, and then the next loop around, you add your hi-hats and that sort of thing. You would use this here, okay? This here is automation for recording automation. So in this case, we wouldn't have armed any tracks for this, right? We should just turn this on. And then what I can do is I can now play with the parameters here to change things and it'll record. So I just hit record up here. It'll give me the count in and then I can kind of mess with the sound. Like so, and then I could come over here and I could record again, maybe with the frequency, right? So and then when I play back, it will play back all the automation I just did. All right, so that is what this allows you to do. All right, so this button here, since there's not really any automation that's disabled, this thing is just grayed out. But if somehow something's disabled, so for example, if I see how this is set and it's doing its thing. Now, if I move this, it disables that automation, okay? So now it's just locked where I last placed it, all right? So if I click on this, it will re-enable the automation. This here is like a snapshot. Yeah, capture MIDI. So if I'm just playing around with something, right? So let's just say I've got this here. I'm going to get rid of this again. So if I've got this here and I'm just goofing around. And I'm like, oh, cool, that was kind of neat. I wish I had a way to capture what I just did. Well, now you can. You can just click here and it just will input what you just played. So you never really lose an idea. So that's a really cool feature there. This is a session record button. So this is more used for this window here. As you can see, we're getting ready to record just a clip over here. And we'll get over here pretty quick, but I think for beginners, it might be better to just stay on the arrangement window because it can get a little bit confusing when you have two different windows. As you can see here, see how this is grayed out? This is grayed out now because I just went over here and was starting to record on the same track, but in this window, all right? And then I would have to come over here to display this, again, letting Ableton know that I want this track to be heard instead of what I'm recording here. And that's why it can get a little bit confusing. So I'll show basically what this does in just a second, but I think it makes more sense to just come over here and have a loop set on and then turn your loop on, which is this here. This here just says where you're at in the track. These here, this is really cool. This is like a punch in and a punch out. All right. So the way you can do a punch in and punch out is, let's say I want to record from just 2 bars here, right? So I could set my little loop to this, and then I can just turn this on and off, and then I can hit record, right? And it will. So if we come over here, what we've got here is like, it's really cool. It's a punch in and a punch out. All right. So if I'm recording on this track here and I just want this area punched in and out, I just arm the track, hit record, and it'll only record inside this section. So I can start here. I could be singing along or something and just punch in a certain vocal part or whatever. Just and now it'll start recording. And since I have this, it punches out right after that section. So it's only going to record in this section. So you would use your loop marker to set those points. And if this is on, then you're going to punch in. And if this is on, this is where you'll punch out. If this is on and this is off, then it'll just start here and it'll just keep recording. All right. What else do you need to know? This here, this just changes your pencil, your pointer into a pencil tool, which has different features. For example, if we're creating automation of some sort, an automation is anything. See this red line here, this is automation, and I can choose what I want to automate. For example, I can choose the volume, right? And now with my arrow, I can double click to create these little elbows, and then I can kind of create like a ramp up and a ramp down and this sort of thing, right? Now, with the pencil tool, let's just kind of bring this down. If we click on the pencil tool, it will use the resolution that we're on. Right now, we're at a half bar resolution, right? If I right click, I can change this to whatever resolution I want, or I can choose like a narrow or medium grid, right? As you can see, that way the closer I get in, the smaller the grid gets, all right? In this case, let's just do 1/8 notes, all right? So now we've got 1/8 notes, and we've got our pencil tool. So now I could just turn up just the sections that I want on the grid, right? So that's just a different approach that you can take. And if I switch it back over, as you can see, all the points are added. And then I can come here if I want with just the arrow tool, and I can do ramps, and I can, just change what's going on as well. So yeah, the pencil tool can do some cool stuff like that. So we can get rid of that. But you can literally, anything that you want to control as far as automate, you could just go into anything. In this instrument, for example, if I want to control this level, I just click on it. And as you can see over here now, the oscillator B level is ready to go. So I can just automate that. And then if I want to automate the frequency, I can just click on that. And now I can automate the filter frequency, all right? What a masterpiece. So yeah, that is how you do basic automation, all right? The next thing I'll get into is just clip properties. So with MIDI clips, you've got all this fun stuff here. And down here, if you open this up, you've got even more, all right? So you've got your clips, your notes, and your envelopes, all right? So over here, You're probably not going to use this unless you're using hardware and choosing different presets on a hardware piece of equipment. Okay, so most people are not going to use this. So you don't need to worry about that. Time signature, you can leave the same. This here, you could just choose what color you want your clip to be. Pretty simple. Or you can just right click on the clip and choose a color here. All right, real simple. So that's this area here. If you apply a groove, you could actually commit to that groove, but you don't really need to. So you don't need to worry so much about that. But I'll show you right now. So let's just say, what I'm going to do here, just to make this really simple, let's get rid of all the notes here. And I'm just going to make one bar and 16th notes. So I'm just going to duplicate just with Command D. So I just got, all right. Then I'm going to grab the looper, drag it over. And you could also, if you click on the clip and then just hit Command L, it'll automatically put the looper right around that clip that you did, which is really convenient. So we can, all right, still has some of that automation that we did before, which is cool. But now in our groove pool here, if I right click here, I can browse the groove pool. And what this does is it puts more groove. As you'll notice, this is just like straight 16 notes. Sounds pretty robotic, but we could come in, and once again, if we turn on our little headphone thing here, we can listen to other kind of groove patterns. You hear how that has kind of a shuffle to it? So if I drag that into here, now I've got this shuffle, and we can actually choose how close we want the timing to be and whatever. I'm actually going to turn the velocity up and the timing all the way up so we can really hear a difference. So now over here, as you can see, we've got our groove, so I can choose this hip hop groove and listen to how different these 16th notes sound. Right? This is straight. This is with the groove. You could even do interesting things with like Latin percussion grooves. All right, so that's interesting. Drag that in. Change to that. This 16th note is completely transformed to another kind of pattern. Really interesting. So that is groove. So if I like that groove, I can leave it just like that if I want, but if you want to change the actual notes to the groove, you can just hit commit. And as you can see now, it changed the way that these notes are played, right? If I undo that, if I go over to the hip hop groove and hit commit, now we can see exactly how these notes are played. All right, so that's what commit does. Notes here. So what we can do is we can half time the notes. Oop. If I highlight all of these, actually, I'm just going to come back to a regular 16th note just so I can see this better. So I can highlight everything and half it, and that'll make it double time, right? Or I can multiply it. It'll make it half time. So I'll probably need to stretch this out. There we go. If I've got notes, so let's just just get rid of this real quick. Let me just consolidate this real quick. Now it'll go from high to low. All right, so it's just reversing what was played. If I go to invert, what's going to happen is it's going to change. The lowest note will become the highest note, the second lowest will become the second highest, and so forth. So this is going to be similar with what's going on here, but yeah, inverting. Legato is if we have a bunch of short notes, right? Like this. Legato will just take out the empty space in between and lengthen the notes. All right, so that's legato there. Next, we just have start point and end point. This is just, as you can see, this is just where we start at the beginning. Most of the time, you're just going to leave this at the beginning. But if you wanted to, you know, try to see what different interesting things could happen, you could actually move the start point. And that's all that this is. And the end point here is over here. All right. When our loop is on, it's going to loop this section. So as long as I drag this out, this section is going to be looped. Whereas if I don't have loop on, as you can see, this is just a bunch of emptiness, right? Because we're not looping the part. It's just playing this part and then it's continuing. All right. So if you make something that's meant to be looped, make sure to turn loop on. And then you can change the length of your clip. So right now the length of this clip is just 1 bar. I could change it to 2 bars. And as you can see now there's 1 bar and the second bar is empty because we haven't put any notes in there. That is that there. And then we get into our envelopes, and this is kind of where we could come in and do different sorts of volume control on the clip itself. You know, so for example, I could just play with any of these parameters, the mix or the panning or the reverb or whatever. Okay, so that is your basic clip properties. Here, if we unlink something, you're going to see something like this. We could just create like a repeating sort of thing, like every half bar or something like that. I can say, we just want to repeat this volume curve, right? So or maybe even quarter note. And so forth. So that's unlinked. It'll just repeat that over this, as you can see, it's just repeating that over this whole clip. So those are your clip properties there. All right. Your audio properties, if we drag in a sample or a loop or something like that into an audio track, and let's just get rid of this for right now. Come over here, you've got, once again, you've got your groove. So you can apply this hip hop groove to audio as well, and it will shift that. So for example, we've got, let's turn this, make it a little faster. If I choose this groove, it not only controls the timing, but also the volume. So I can have it control the velocity, or leave the velocity alone and just do the timing. And then I can randomize it so that it gets a little bit sloppier. So just a few percent will just make it play just a little bit different, sound more like a live drummer. If you have too much random, it just sounds like a drunk player. All right. So, yeah, so the groove pool works with audio as well, which is very, very fun. And of course you can commit to that as well. Over here, we've got, you don't really need to mess too much with the edit and save. You've got reverse, so you can reverse what's being played. Cool. You've got transpose. This is just volume control of the whole clip. All right. Then you've got your warp settings. Mostly with drums, you're going to want to set, keep it on beats. And transients, this is just fine. Yeah, with this, you can change to different types of warping. Since I'm not sure what the original tempo of this is, but if I slow it down quite a bit, right, it's going to actually stretch that audio. And each of these is going to affect the sound differently. Tones, textures. Repitch is pretty clean, but it changes the pitch, just like if you were to slow down a record. And if you speed up the record. All right, so that's repitch. Then you've got complex, which is pretty good for complex sounds and stuff. Keeps it sounding pretty tight when you do a lot of time stretching. But you can still hear that fuzziness. Sometimes that's a cool effect. And then you've got complex pro, which is a little bit better, and then you can play with the formants and stuff as well. So you got that there. If we come back to beats, if we come to transients, that's just every kind of loud part at the beginning of each drum is going to be affected. Right here, this could either go back and forth, so it'll just, in between the samples, it'll just kind of move back and forth through little sections of audio, which sounds kind of weird and interesting. So for playing it slow again. Or we can have a forward loop, which sounds more stuttery. Or we can just have this here, which is kind of plays a little bit more straightforward, but it still has a little bit of looping happening. And then this here, we could actually shorten in between the transients, so we could actually shorten the sound. Right? Which is pretty fun. You can have really, really stripped down or full on. So that is that section. Obviously, looping is going to loop a certain section, and you would just choose that looping here, right? So right. And then, you know, obviously your loop length and that sort of thing is here, or you can, you know, once again do it like that. You can change your start point once again with your start point. All right. You can change your end point. And for the most part, you're not going to need to do that until you start, you know, getting a little bit more advanced. And then you've got your envelopes once again, where you can control different parameters. For example, I could change like the pitch going through. And this is kind of fun for that pencil tool. And by the way, if you want to automatically shift to the pencil tool, you just hit the B key and it'll shift between the pencil and the arrow. All right. And now I can kind of just go to certain parts and change the transpose. doing some kind of extreme stuff just to show you what's possible. Make this go a little faster. So you can mess with the sounds within the clip as well, which is a lot of fun. And you can get in the mixer, the panning, and that sort of thing. The reverb and delay is basically your return tracks here. And what I'll say about return tracks, you come with two basics, right? If you click here, it just kind of loads some basic stuff. And that way, as you see over here, these two little buttons over here, as I turn this up, I can get some reverb happening. All right, or I can get some delay happening. Whatever it is on here. And this, what's cool is you can have like one delay and you can add a certain amount to any of your tracks, right? And it's really easy to add like something new. You can just create, insert track, and then you've got a new return. So I can now drag in a different audio effect if I want. Maybe I want, who knows, let's just do a flanger. So we'll have flanger set to 100%, do some crazy stuff here, and maybe a grain delay. I just want to get kind of an extreme effect so that you can kind of hear what actually is going on. Turn the feedback way up on this. And now I've got this effect here. So and what I'm going to do here, let's go back to our clip and we'll kind of erase all this automation. There's the delay. Since this is our third one, we're using our third send. As you can see, it creates a new one every time. And if I turn it up, I can do some interesting stuff. So all this weird stuff, you can just add just a little bit if you want. So that's basically how return tracks work. And if you come over to this window, you could see it calls them sends. And once again, if I add another return track, it will add another send as well. Okay, so that's kind of how they correspond. So over in the browser window, really simple stuff. Let me make sure I've kind of gone through. Yeah, we've gone through pretty much everything we need in the audio clip. So yeah, in the browse window, we've got just different categories. We've got our sounds, so you can kind of scroll through all the sounds in Ableton, you know. And then when you're ready, you just kind of drag it here, and it will give you that instrument. And then you can, you know, do whatever you want with it. Drums. These include a lot of my own presets, but when you're first opening Ableton, this will have some of its own kits. And a lot of these kits are internal, so you've got a lot to choose from, really fun. These are your instruments, so synths and drums and samplers and that sort of thing are all here in the instruments. You've got your internal audio effects here. So all your audio effects, all your MIDI effects are here. Max for Live also gives you instruments, effects, and MIDI effects as well. And this is just, it's another company that creates loads of tools that work for Ableton. It's also a standalone company, but they partnered up, and just, you know, you can just go down a deep rabbit hole with some of the possibilities with that. Then your plugins, any third-party plugin that you buy, if you buy Serum or if you buy like a Van Hola reverb or whatever it is that you're picking up, that's going to show up in your plugins. All right, so all your third-party plugins are going to be in here. And once again, all these plugins are going to be MIDI tracks, so you would want to drag it onto a MIDI track. Clips, this is just loads of kind of preset loops and clips that Ableton has created so that you can get ideas started fast. Some interesting sounds here. Let's see, robot. So if you like something, you could just drag it in and it'll create a new track for you. All right. So those are clips. Samples are the internal samples that come with Ableton. And then when we get into packs, these are just loads more tools that you could download. It might not show any of this except for maybe your core library. So you would come over here to get more packs at Ableton Live, click there. And as long as you've got a login, you've got loads of free and paid tools that you can add to Ableton as well. So loads and loads and loads of stuff. All right. I don't want to confuse you with all the capabilities, so we won't go too deep into that. Then you've got your user library. You don't really need to go in here, but this is kind of where all your presets and stuff is saved. Current project just holds on to everything that you're doing in your current project. So as you can see, I dragged in this audio clip. So that audio clip is in my samples here, right? It's even got when I reverse the sound as well. So it holds on to that sort of stuff. And then you have locations that you can create. So if you come here, add folder, you can add a folder location. You can just, if you want your desktop or a download folder, or if you've got like a sample folder, you know, which I have here. Let me get out of here. I've got samples right here. So all my samples are inside this folder. So I just create a folder here in my browser to make it very easy for me to get to different things. Anything that I would personally want to use or get access to, I can create that just by hitting add folder. Okay. And that's the browser area. Over here, if the keyboard is on, then when you hit your QWERTY keyboards, that, you know, A, S, D, F, G, and all those, it will actually play your MIDI notes, right? So with this bass here, so I can just use my QWERTY keyboard, turn solo off. Or if you've got a MIDI keyboard, you can do that. But if you're using your QWERTY keyboard, you want to turn this little synth thing on, and then you could use your upper two letter keys. So it's like A, F, S, E, D, F, and so forth, right? You can figure out all those notes. And if you want to change the octave, you just, to go a lower octave, you hit Z. And to go a higher octave, you hit X. All right, really simple stuff. So yeah, if you want to use your QWERTY keyboard, you need that on, because if it's off, then it's just gonna use the letters for your quick key access sort of things. So speaking of that sort of thing, let's just get into the basics of editing. Okay, and this works pretty much the same with audio and MIDI. So if you want to put a slice in a file, right, in a clip, you just click where you want that slice and hit Command E or Control E if you're on a PC, and it'll create that space. Alternatively, you could simply highlight a section you want to cut out, and you could just drag it, and now you've dragged that out. Now, if you highlight and hold Alt and drag, then it'll create a copy for you. Okay, pretty cool stuff. Another thing is if you highlight a section and you just simply do like a slight drag and back up, it'll create those marks for you. So sometimes that's quicker than doing the key Command E. All right. So those are the cuts. If you want to delete, that's simple. You just hit Command X. Copy, obviously, Command C. If you want to paste that, Command V. If you want to duplicate, you hit Command D, and you can duplicate all day long. And yeah, once again, if you want to drag and copy, you can just highlight, hold the Alt key, and then drag, and then you've got that sort of thing. So you can do all kinds of interesting stuff. If you want to take a certain cut, like right here, we can Command E to make the cuts, and then I can hit the R key to reverse that. So now this one part is just reversed. I can highlight, let's say, this section here just to make it more noticeable, and so forth. So those are the basics that you're going to want when you're doing any of the editing, right? Cut, copy, paste, duplicate, and delete. And if you're confused by any of that, you could come over here, and as you can see, you've got your cut, copy, paste, duplicate, delete. So that makes it pretty easy to start saying, oh, I want to take this part and copy it, and I'll paste it over here, and then I'll duplicate that, whatever you want to do, okay? And it's the same with a MIDI file as well. You basically do the same thing. Once again, if you want to create a MIDI clip, you could just highlight, and then Command Shift M will create a MIDI clip. If you've got your automation on, and the way you turn your automation on is simply by hitting A. As you can see, we've got our automation here. And now if we have our automation, like let's just say we have this part here and we want to copy it, what we would do is we would highlight below this the name bar, right? And that will allow us to duplicate, delete, copy, paste, just the automation. If we want to duplicate the whole clip, then we need to highlight all the way to the top of the clip, and then we can duplicate it. And as you can see, it's making these duplicate markers. All right. If we want to lock in the automation, then we would lock it here. If we unlock the automation, then when I highlight this and drag it somewhere else, the automation goes with it. If I have this and I drag it while it's locked, the automation stays where it is, okay? So that's all that is. So if you have any further beginner questions, let me know, and I'd be happy to, direct you to other videos or make another video to answer any questions. But this should kind of get you started in understanding how to move around in Ableton. Once again, we do have this window. I would recommend that you don't use this unless you're using like a push controller or something. But basically the way this works is instead of having all this linear stuff, you're basically creating different loops in different sections here, right? And then you can play those loops by clicking over here in a scene. So you can kind of create different jam scenes. And then once you have all your jam scenes created, you can record that over to your arrangement window. But since everything needs to end up in the arrange window, and as you can see, because I did that, it now grays out everything over here, which can get confusing. So you would just click this to get back over to here. That's why I don't really recommend that you do any work over on this side at the moment. Probably better that you work with like a loop length here, and then just kind of create your grooves and stuff inside that, and then you can copy and paste across to create your work. That's going to be the easiest approach. I could do another video on the session window or the clip window, whichever you want to call it. But I think working from this is probably the best place for you to start. So with that, I hope you got something out of this, and drop a comment. Let me know if there's anything else that you got questions about if you are a beginner at Ableton. So take it easy. Have a fantastic one. Once again, Jason Timothy, musicsoftwaretraining.com. Take care.